Hi guys, welcome back to Honest Straightforward Reviews. I'm really excited today to pit the RX 6700 XT and also look at the Sapphire 6700 XT Nitro Plus. Before I go ahead, I would like to mention that this channel is completely funded by me. I'm a one-man show. If you like this channel, you can help out and make sure it's survival just by subscribing. That's all. It's free, it doesn't cost you anything. You can give it a like, share it with your friends, and that way the word spreads. You can further support me and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Patreon. Patreon is very important. I've got pledges there. It really helps out. I've worked hard on this review and worked really tirelessly. I've done over 140 tests for games. I've done another 20 tests for benchmarks, and I've tested 3 different benchmarks, and I've tested 16 games for all the graphic cards, and I've done fresh lot of testing for the Taichi. I haven't used old testing, so just to get a good comparison with the latest drivers, so please do stick to the end. That way you can ensure you get the whole information and really understand what I'm trying to say. Without further ado, let's get into this. AMD on the 3rd of March 2021 announced their Big Navi 22 release of their RX 6700 XT, which is the cheapest current card at the moment. It was set to release on the 18th of March. I've got a video below if you want to check out what they announced and things like that. I've got a short video of that. I've cut it down and made it really short, so you can have a look at that. Now this is the successor to their flagship card from last generation, the 5700 XT, and in this review I'll also have that there as well, so I'll run the tests on that as well. So just to give you guys a good idea of what to expect between the 6700 XT, 5700 XT and the Sapphire Nitro 6700 XT, and I've also got a Taichi 6800 XT as well. I didn't include the 6800, I did the Taichi just to get you guys going and get you a good idea of what to expect for how much you spend. Now what are the similarities? First of all, this with the 5700 XT, so both of them have GDDR6 memory, so there's no differences with that, and shading processor units are 2560, which is the same. However, it is clocked at a faster speed. The memory uses 192 bit width bus memory, if this is for the reference card, and 11 phase power. It'll have a base clock of 2321 MHz, a gaming clock of 2424 MHz, and boosts up to 2581 MHz, which sounds really good, but it's been cut down on a lot of other things. For example, the TMUs is 160, there's only 64 ROPs and 40 RT cores for ray tracing hardware acceleration, which is a lot less. The graphic card also has a 8-pin and a 6-pin power connector and is listed at an official 230 wattage. Now let's look at what Sapphire has done with the Nitro version. It's got the same sort of 3-bladed fan which runs 2 in one direction, the outer ones, and the inner one runs at the opposite direction of those. It looks pretty beefy. It's got a few RGBs on it as well, which makes it nice. It's got dual BIOS, but it's very confusing. It doesn't tell you what it does. Now this has been downgraded to the 12GB graphic memory, which is really good. You shouldn't need more than 12GB VRAM anyways, 16GB is a luxury, which is nice to see they've priced it a little bit lower. Now mind you, the ray tracing, it is capable of it and things like that, but if you're into ray tracing, Nvidia pioneered that 2 years ago from today. They're really good at it. They have DLSS 2.0 to upscale it and things like that. These guys have something called Infinity as well, which is I wouldn't get into it. It's really rubbish. I've used it on Marvel's Avengers. I would give it a miss in short. Now let's talk about this graph I've got for you guys, just a really short graph before we start getting into the gaming graph and clock speeds and things like that. So straight off, looking at the Sapphire Nitro 6700 XT and the Radeon 5700 XT. Now the Sapphire one and the reference card 6700 XT, they're basically exactly the same except for their max boost clock, which is at 2622 for the Sapphire and 2581 for the reference card. Now let's look at streaming processors. So the Radeon 6900 XT has 5120 reduced to 4608 for the 6800 XT, reduced to a further 3840 for the 68, reduced to 2560 for the older AIB and the reference 6700 XT, which is the same as the Radeon 5700 XT. Looking at RT cores, it's half at what the 6900 XT offers at 80 and being 40. then it goes up to 60 on the 6800 XT and the 6800, and the 6800 XT goes up to 72 RT cores. The 5700 XT has 0 RT cores. Now the boost clocks, the max boost clocks for all of them, so we'll go through 6900 XT is 2250, which is the same as 6800 XT. The 6800 has a 2105 boost clock. The 6700 XT has a 2581, and the 5700 XT has a 1605 boost clock. Let's look at RAM. So the previous generation topped out at 8. They have 12 gig and the rest of the cards are at 16. Now the RAM bandwidth for all the top 6800, 6800 XT and 6900 XT are at 512, and same RAM bandwidth as well. Whereas the 6700 XT is at 384 and 191, and the 6700 XT was at 448 and 256 bit. Now the wattage goes up, so it was at 225, 230, 250 and 300 and 300 respectively for all those graph cards, going from the oldest to the newest and the oldest to the best, you know. Now Sapphire's design is a nice premium product, and while in the more mainstream high-end segment, it looks like it's just really beefy, you know, with a triple slot cooler and a 2.5 slot design. It's got 3 display ports and 1 HDMI. The backplate has nice cutouts to let all the air out. It'll mostly be letting the air out where you've got the top LEDs and the bottom, and also through that as well. So hopefully it won't be blasting your CPU with too much hot air. They've obviously increased the max boost clock to 2622, which is not much, but it's still good. And TGP allowance at performance mode is about 210 watts. The card's length is at about 31 centimeters and weighs just over 1 kilos. All right, without further ado, let's get into the graph, guys. All right, first things first. So up the top, we've got 5700 XT that clocks at 1605, then goes up to 1750, then max boost is an unimpressive 1755, just a 5 megahertz increase. We look at the 6700 XT reference, which starts off at 2000, goes up to 2424, and a nice boost of 2581. Nitro has taken that, kept everything same except for the boost clock to 2649. Now the Taichi is at 2000 base, goes up to a gaming clock of 2110 and 2360 as a max. The next graph I've got is the same sort of information in a stacked chart. Now I don't like stacked bars because they give you a different visual, making one or the other look really bad, whereas it's not the same. Now let's get into the first testing. I'll go through the benchmark first. So the first benchmark I've got for you guys is the 3D Mark TimeSpy and Firestrike. So I've got TimeSpy in orangish color. So let's go through TimeSpy. 9345 is the score for the 5700 XT, and looking at that generationally, it's improved by about 2,500 for the 6700 XT. The Nitro isn't much of an improvement, it's a tiny improvement. The Taichi, you can see it's miles ahead in that test. When we move on to Firestrike, the 5700 XT only gets about just over 6,000 in score, another about 2,500 increase at 8,531 for the reference 6700 XT, and the Nitro again pulls a little bit ahead of the reference card. The Taichi goes up to nearly double that of the 5700 XT. And the next graph I've got for you guys is the new Unigen 2 superposition benchmark. I've done this only in 4K and I used DirectX 11 at max settings, so I've maxed everything out. Now for all my tests, I'm using the Aorus Master X570 by Gigabyte, and I've paired it up with a Ryzen 5900X with 32 gigs of RAM that's been boosted to 4000 megahertz, which is at CL18. Now, first of all, let's look at the 5700 XT, which sits at about 40 frames per second at 4K. The 6700 XT has a nice boost of 57 frames, and that's a 16 frame difference. What is disappointing is the Nitro was exactly the same. There's no improvement between the Nitro and the reference. We'll look in the end through the power consumption and also the fan speed, the noise speed, and the heat between these two cards, because I have a funny feeling the Nitro, you would be buying it for being a quieter card and a cooler card rather than a faster card. I don't feel like the Nitro is going to be any faster than the reference, because AMD like to handicap their progress themselves. They have capped what the AIBs can push their cards to, which is really disappointing. Looking at the Taichi, that goes up to 82 frames, which is nicely done. Now, the first game I got for you guys is Cyberpunk. I don't really always use this game because it's so buggy at the moment. They've got a patch 1.2 coming out. Hopefully that'll fix things, but I'm running patch 1.12, which is quite stable. That's why I wanted to include this, because a lot of people want to see Cyberpunk and want to play Cyberpunk. So first of all, I've got the 4K results. The 5700 XT was just destroyed by this game at 17 frames, whilst the 6700 XT didn't do much better, but a lot better over the 5700 XT at 24. Again, what I thought was going to happen throughout this test is the Nitro was the exact same speed for frames in regards to the reference card. The Taichi goes up to 35, which is a good 11 frame increase. When we move to 2K, we see the reference 5700 XT doing 37 frames, which is still unplayable in my opinion, and the 6700 XT at 49, again unplayable. The Nitro gets to the playability around at least 60 frames per second. I would like to see and play Cyberpunk around 90 frames. That's what my minimum requirement is. The Taichi didn't fare much better for my expectations, which is at 70, which is pretty good still. Next game is a new game that I've included for this test, is Hitman 3 at max settings. Looking at the 5700 XT, it does a respectable 68 frames at 4K. The 6700 XT jumps up to 81. The Nitro does a margin of error 82, and the Taichi goes up to a nice 131 frames at 4K. When we move to 2K, all the games do a lot better. The 5700 does a very playable 122 frames, which the 6700 XT takes and improves upon by another 22 frames at 144. The Nitro only has an improvement of 2 frames at 146, and the Taichi really jumps out up front at 215 frames. Now, I'm not going to keep talking about the Taichi. I'll just leave that. I'll talk about the rest of the three, because realistically, if you're looking at the 6700 XT, you shouldn't be looking at the 6800 XT. The only reason I've got it there is for you guys to really understand what the improvement is going to be if you fork out a little bit more. The next game I have is F1 2020. Looking at 4K, the reference 5700 XT only did 101 frames, which is pretty good at 4K, whilst the 6700 XT improved upon that by 37 frames, and the Nitro improved upon the reference card by another 4 frames at 142. When we move to 2K, we see a nice 169 on the 5700 XT, whilst the newer card, reference card, does 225. And to my surprise, at 2K, the Nitro did a 225, which was exactly the same as the reference. The next game I've got is Metro Exodus. Metro Exodus saw the 5700 XT struggle at 33 frames, whilst the two other cards, the Nitro and the reference 6700 XT, were both on par at 45 frames. When we moved to 2K, it was a bit more playable at 56 frames for the reference 5700 XT, whilst the reference 6700 XT was at a 75 frame, and the Nitro margin of error had 1 frame improvement on that. Next game I've got is Resident Evil. Resident Evil sees the 5700 XT struggle with 48 frames, whilst the 6700 XT does a nice job of 64 frames, which is quite playable. The Nitro doesn't offer any improvement. When we move to 2K, we see the 5700 XT do 92 frames, whilst the 6700 XT does a very good job of an improvement and going up to 131. The Nitro, again, margin of error, just a 1 frame improvement. Doom Eternal. At 4K, the 5700 XT does 76 frames, and that's been improved by the reference 6700 XT at 117, which is very impressive, whilst the Nitro does 118, which is nearly on par with 1 frame margin of error. When we move to 2K, we see the 5700 XT really improve and go up to the 144 mark refresh rate, which I like seeing for first person shooters. It was doing 142. Then 6700 XT does 195, and the Nitro again just 1 frame margin of error improvement. Next game I got for you guys is Red Dead Redemption 2. The reference 5700 XT does 32 frames at 4K, which is really poor, and the 6700 XT does 42, which is a good improvement, still not good for 4K, and the Nitro is just 1 frame ahead on that card. Now moving on to 2K, the 5700 XT does a little bit better at 53 frames, whilst the reference 6700 XT makes makes the game a lot more playable and pleasant at 70 frames, and the Nitro has no improvement on that. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Looking at the 5700 XT, we've got 35 frames, whilst the AMD 6700 XT went to 42, the Nitro stayed the same. We move on to 2K, the 5700 XT goes up to 61, which is quite playable, still not the 90 frame mark that I like to see. The 6700 XT goes up to 82, which is what I like to see, and the Nitro again, no improvement offered. Control. At 4K, the 5700 XT struggles with just 21 frames. The 6700 XT is struggling as well, but offers a 8 frame improvement at 29. The Nitro has no improvement to offer. Moving on to 2K, the 5700 XT goes up to 41 frames, while the 6700 XT goes up to nearly 60 frames at 59, and the Nitro again having no improvements being offered. Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 4K sees the 5700 XT perform at 45 frames, whilst the 6700 XT gives a nice improvement of 20 frames at 65 frames. And we are starting to see the Nitro not do any better, especially at 4K, offering the exactly same. Now moving on to 2K, we see the 5700 XT go to 88 frames, while the reference AMD goes up to 128, and the Nitro improves by 2 frames over that at 130. That's a nice improvement, guys, if you see the generational jump between the two reference AMD cards. Next game I've got for you guys is Civilization 6, which sees the 5700 XT at 4K at 85 frames. The 6700 XT does 99, and the Nitro just does 100 margin of error. When we move to 2K, the 5700 XT improves to 126, while the 6700 XT improves to 149, which is matched by the Nitro, not improved upon at all. Next game I have is Death Stranding. Death Stranding sees the 5700 XT do 55 frames. At 4K sees the 6700 XT do 58 frames, and the Nitro offers 1 frame improvement margin of error. At 2K we see the 5700 XT at 94 frames, which is a nicety to see. The 6700 XT was doing 118 frames, which is very nice to see as well, which is a 24 frame increase, and the Nitro offered no improvement. Next game I've got for you guys is Battlefield 5. Battlefield 5 sees the 5700 XT do 72 frames, whilst the 6700 XT does 88 frames, and the Nitro doesn't improve upon that. What I was surprised with was 2K. Let's go through 2K. The 5700 XT does 127 frames, improved upon by the 6700 XT by a whopping nearly 40 frames at 165. And I've ran this test a few times on the Nitro, and disappointingly it was actually slower than the reference card at 163. Now guys, mind you, I've got a link, by the way, explaining everything what I'm about to say. I've got a link below, so that explains Silicon Lottery and why I choose to not do games in overclock mode and switch their BIOS and things like that. I just leave everything in stock and just do the testing. So I've done all these at stock settings, not switching BIOS and things like that and overclocking. So please do check that video out to get a better understanding of why I do that. The next game I've got for you guys is Borderlands 3. At 4K sees the 5700 XT at 31 frames. The 6700 XT offers an improvement of 11 frames, which is really nice to see. At 42, the Nitro matches it, no improvement at all. When we move to 2K, we see the 5700 XT do about 60 frames per second, and that's been improved upon by the 6700 XT by 23 frames at 83. The Nitro again, no improvements shown at all. The second last game I've got for you guys is Watch Dogs Legion. Watch Dogs sees the 5700 XT do 30 frames at 4K. The 6700 XT improves by 6 frames, and the Nitro doesn't improve at all at 36 frames. Let's move on to 2K. 2K sees the 5700 XT at 49, which is still unplayable in my opinion. The 6700 at 62 frames, which is quite playable, and the Nitro margin of error 63 frame, which is a frame improvement. As usual, the last game I've got for you guys is Witcher 3, which is one of my favorite games. I never used to like RPGs, but this game got me into RPGs, and I never used to like first-person shooters, and Halo 1 was the first game that got me into first-person shooters. Now, we see the 5700 XT at 50 frames when we do a 4K test. The 6700 5700 XT improves that to a 65 frame, which is really nice to see. The Nitro for the first time really improves on there by 2 frames. However, disappointingly, when we move to 2K, we see the 5700 XT at 86 frames, the 6700 XT at 116 frames, while the Nitro margin of error is actually 1 frame behind the reference card. Let's look at a 16 game average. Looking at the 5700 XT at 4K, it did about 50 frame average. The 6700 XT does a nice over 65 frames. The Nitro does 66, which is a really small improvement at 4K over the 6700 XT. And if you wanted to go to Taichi, the Taichi really improves upon that by 95, nearly 96 frames. When we move on to 2K, we see the 5700 XT at nearly 88 frames. We see the 6700 XT improve upon that by nearly 30 frames at nearly 116 frames. And we see the Nitro offering just under 1 frame improvement. We see the Taichi at 155. Now, before I get into MSRP, real world pricing, and best bang for your buck frame wise, I'd like to get into temperatures as well. So first of all, I've got the 5700 XT running the hottest card out of all of them at 48 degrees. It does offer fan stop, so it's running at 25 decibels, which is not very loud. Okay, however, when you go up to gaming, it goes up to 92 Celsius and the decibels goes up to 44, which you can hear, and it goes to about 1400 RPM, which is really high. We go on to the 6700 XT. We see again another hot card at 47 degrees with the fan stop though. When it's gaming, it is at 36 decibels with 81 degrees and the RPMs are around 1300. What we see in the Nitro is a nice improvement of about 4 degrees when the fan is stopped, so it's cooler at 43 degrees. When gaming, surprisingly, not only is it cooler, so a good 12 degrees cooler at 69 degrees, it's also 10 decibels quieter, just doing 26 decibels, and the fans were running at just under 1200 RPMs. That's really impressive, guys. So what the Nitro offers is it's taken that reference AMD card, not really pushed it much, but what it's done is given it a really nice beefy cooler to keep that PCB and VRAM and everything cool in there. When we look at the quiet BIOS, to my surprise, at fan stop it was actually cooler. Not only was it quieter, it was cooler as well. So it's got normal and quiet BIOS. At quiet BIOS it was running at 40 degrees when it's idling. When it was working, it was a tiny bit higher at 72 degrees and the fans were spinning about the same and the decibels were about the same as well when it was in quiet mode. Personally, I'll just run this card in normal mode as it'll give me a quieter, cooler experience and at the same cost of quietness. We're looking also at the Taichi as well. The Taichi is quite a hot card as well at 46 degrees when the fan is stopped. At gaming it's 73 degrees and with a decibel of 35 decibels, which is quite audible, and nearly 1800 RPMs. When we have the quiet BIOS turned on, it sees the card creep up a little bit to 75 degrees. The sound goes down to 31 and the RPM slows down about 250 RPMs. Now let's look at pricing. The 5700 reference XT was MSRP'd at 500, whilst the 6700 XT is MSRP'd here in Australia for, this is our Australian dollars by the way, as per the graph heading, so 630. The Nitro should be selling at about 765 and the Taichi now should be running at about 1100 Aussie dollars because the Aussie dollar has just strengthened against the US. It's gone up. When we look at the real world pricing, this is where the surprises are. First of all, I'd like to point out I've seen the Taichi being sold for $17.49, which is a good price for it given I had purchased mine for $18.23. However, it's still quite expensive, especially when you compare it to the MSRP. We look at the 5700 XT, which right now is being sold, if you can find one, for $8.49. The reference 6700 XT is getting sold for $8.29, which is cheaper. That's a good point to note. And the Nitro is being sold for $12.49, which is crazy, guys. That's really expensive. If you had just on that, I wouldn't worry about being cool or whatnot. I would save $500 and get the 6700 XT. Next we have is a comparison for best bang for your buck card for 2K gaming. Let's look at MSRP. So MSRP, the 6700 is the best card, the reference, at just under $5.50. It even beats the 5700 XT. So that's where you can see what AMD have done. AMD have not only done a card that's quicker, but it costs you less for performance gain. What I would have liked to see is the card being another $30 or $40 Aussie cheaper at just under $600, maybe at $599. That would have been really nice to see. The Nitro Plus at MSRP is $6.58, so you're paying nearly over $1 more to get that cooler experience at MSRP. However, if you look between the Nitro and the Taichi is at only $7. Okay, a lot stronger card, a lot faster card. Now, when we look at real world pricing, we see the 5700 is not worth it right now at all at nearly $10 per frame. The 6700 XT is still the cheapest out of the lot at just over $7 per frame. The Nitro completely not worth it, nearly at $11 a frame, and the Taichi at $11.28. So if you were comparing the Nitro and the Taichi, I would go for the Taichi. This is the reason I put the Taichi in there, because of that price that the Nitro is being sold at. Now, the next graph I've got is 4K, best bang for your buck. Let's look at MSRP first. MSRP for the 5700 XT is $10. The 6700 XT is a nice $9.65, which at 4K is nice. You're just paying under $10, which is an improvement again on the 5700 XT. The Nitro goes up to $11.59, while the Taichi, to my pleasant surprise, because it's doing so well in 4K and the Nitro didn't, the Taichi actually costs less per frame if you are gaming at 4K. When we move on to real world cost, we see the 5700 XT being completely not worth it at $17 per frame. The reference card, well worth it at $12.69. The Nitro, the most expensive at $18.92. I wouldn't buy it. And the Taichi going to $18.25 and beating even the Nitro in real world pricing. Okay, let's get into the 5 favorite things of mine and 5 annoying things for me. First of all, let's get into the 5 favorites. The performance is comparable to the RTX 3070 and the RTX 2080 Ti, which is really good. I like the addition of idle fan stop and it not getting that much hotter. It's also very energy efficient due to the 7nm process, 12GB of VRAM, and not handicapping their GPU like Nvidia did to their RTX 3060 Ti, just giving it 8GB, and their RTX 3070 again just 8GB. The addition of dual BIOS, that's always good to see in an AIB card, which is becoming a norm. Let's look at the 5 things that were annoying for me. First of all, the actual price in the market is just crazy. It makes it not worth it at all at $12.49. I don't think it's worth it. Again, what I talked about, AMD limiting artificial overclocking of the memory, that's really annoying. Now, this is something I noticed in my tests. When the card really heats up, the fan speed overshoots a lot, so that's a bit annoying. Obviously, ray tracing performance loss is much bigger than on Nvidia because of the RT cores being cut down a lot more. And what I found annoying is, yes, it's got dual BIOS, but it's got no indication as to which, when you flip the switch, what it does. You know what I mean? There's no little P and a Q or something like that to say this is the quiet mode, this is the performance mode, or this is the quiet mode, this is the normal mode. Nothing whatsoever. Now, the RTX 6700 XT is a nice card. On average, it gives about 8% improvement over the RTX 3060 Ti, and what we see is about 1 to 2% improvement in the Nitro Plus version. Now, what is nice to know is if you did overclock this, it's quite overclockable. It goes up to about just over 2700 megahertz, and once you do that, you see about an average improvement of about 6%, which is really nicely. But again, that extra price really hurt this graphic card. Alright, brings me to my verdict. Look guys, right now, does it matter that it's not that good a card? No. Will it sell? Yes. Will it sell out? Yes. Would you be able to get your hands on it? Unfortunately, probably not. Okay, so realistically, the GPU market right now is so crazy. It's a little bit like the house market in Australia. There's too much demand and not enough supply. So as soon as the 6700 XT, either reference or the Nitro comes out, if you can get your hands on it and if you're happy to pay for it, do it. Okay, but personally, if you're watching this video in the future where the prices have calmed down, I would suggest that you really have a good look at the 6700 XT reference version. It's a really nice entry-level card. I really liked it personally. I wasn't too impressed by the Nitro Plus. The impressive things, as I said, were the 5 top things, and also the fan cooler and the cooler design, but don't expect too much performance out of this card. If you want a little bit more performance, and depending on the price, do your homework, look at a reference 6800 as well. So if you look at the reference 6800, then pit it up against this Nitro Plus and see what the gains are. I bet you'll find, and if the price is not too much more, I bet you'll find that the 6800 reference would be a lot better card for you. Anyways guys, this is it from me. That's my verdict at the moment. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thumbs up if you do. Follow me on everything if you want, and thank you so much for sticking to the end. I really appreciate it. You guys have a lovely day. Take care. Bye bye.